to me judiciously will know this and probably are sick of it, but I give the example of the guy who's tasked to travel from Sri Lanka to the top of Everest.
Right.
And so he's in Sri Lanka and he packs accordingly to a subtropical climate. And he has a backpack and he has the tools that he needs to start going north. And he has to go across the Sea of Bengal and then he gets to India and then he, you know, just keeps going, right? Eventually the environment changes, right?
Right.
Now the altitude changes. Now it starts getting colder. And maybe he's lucky enough with those same tools to get to base camp.
Hmm.
But even if he does, he's not going to make it much farther past
Nope.
15, 17,000 feet in
Yeah.
shorts, and with, canoe paddles. You got to change the tools. The
Right.
tools, you have to drop the tools that no longer work and adopt new ones that are more suited for what's coming ahead.
Yeah.
And so I see eye to eye with you on that, and I think because of our nature as human beings, our brain is very primitive,
Hmm.
is very old. It changes at the pace of evolution, and but social
Mm.
change is very fast, comparatively speaking. So we need to survive, we need to
Yeah.
eat, and we need to reproduce. And change gets in the way of all that. If you have something that works, you're going to stick with it. Your brain biologically is going to
Yep.
keep you with it. And then we carry that on into the workplace and with family and relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And I find it to be very destructive in this world that we're living today. It was greatly useful two
Right.
million, 2 million years ago, or even
No,
250,000
it stopped.
years
It
ago.
stopped working like
Yeah,
10 years ago, right?
yeah.
It's or even more. It's you know, w- what you mentioned brings me to another thing, and it's that people have to get comfortable with change. It's not about not getting wet. It's about dancing in the rain, right? That's the analogy. So the and what kind of like triggered the thought that got triggered with what you said is that it's not only that there's no change, but the change that we are accustomed to is linear. We see the deer running, and we know that from here to here, if it took a certain amount of time to get here to here, that's going to be the same amount of time that it's going to take it to get here, right? So we think linearly. It's ingrained in our brain. The present, the future is exponential, and that's the transform piece of my framework, and it's the problem that we are facing is that we are not well equipped for that. So we have to do conscious and specific things to actually make us think exponentially. So there's a kind of like an analogy of pond that is getting overgrown with algae, right? And every day it doubles the amount of algae, right? So you come out on day one and you see a little bit of algae. Day two you see, twice as much, and so forth and whatever. And one day you come out, let's say it's day 28, whatever, right? You come out and half of the pond is covered in algae, right? It took it 28 days to get there. How many days do you think it's going to take to get it fully covered?
Not that many.
One day, because the next day is going to double and it's going to cover the whole lake, right? So that's where our thinking fails, right? And it's kind of like a trick question, so you know what the answer is going to be, right? But what we have to understand, and people who are not in technology don't tend to think this way, but We started with Moore's law, right? Moore is the founder of Intel. This is just an observation. Laws are observations, right? It's and things that repeat consistently. So the founder of Intel at one point saw that, hey, the amount of transistors kind of like doubles every 18 months, right? And he kind of like kept the record, and he saw that was happening, and that kind of like got translated into the compute power doubles every 18 months, right? And it has been consistent for all the years that we have been in technology, right? So what's interesting is that when you take something and you digitize it, so you convert it into some way where you can put it on a computer, now it's kind of like the man riding on the surfboard, right? That thing that we digitize now moves with Moore's law, because the underlying compute, the wave, is doubling every 18 months. So now my compute power is propelling me, right? And I just found the other day, how I heard this stat: the power of AI is doubling every 6 months. So that's not 3 times faster. That's what's important to see here, right? That's not 3 times faster. That's 8 times faster, right?
Correct.
Right. So it's what we are going to see in the next few years is just going to blow our heads off. I mean, it's going to be crazy, right?
Oh, it already is. It already
Yeah.
is. So let me throw something at you because I think one of the challenges I see, and again, this goes back to this introspection, right?
Hmm.
Everybody or most people I like to read know who T. Harv Eker is, and he wrote a few books. I don't see eye to eye with everything he wrote, but he had some really good nuggets of information that are helpful from a personal development point of view.
Hmm.
He said, "How you do anything is how you do everything," right?
Mm.
And at some point, we as leaders of an organization, to kind of put context into it, have to kind of start observing how people do things and see if
Mm.
those come from personality traits, right?
Yeah.
Because at least in my mind, if you observe your personal world a very particular way,
Yeah.
then most likely you're going to observe your professional world through pretty much the same lens.
Hmm.
And, whatever setbacks you have in your personal world because of how you observe it may permeate into the professional world because now you're observing that in a very similar way. Do you agree, disagree? Have you seen that in your experience?
I think your personal style, it kind of like spreads out in everything that you do. I think you're right on that. The only caveat that I would add is that the it depends on how self-conscious you are in a good way. Are you self-aware? It's a better word, right? Not self-conscious, self-aware, right? So how self-aware you are, because I know, for example, that at certain point I start to lose attention to detail. I know that, right? It's just by nature. I tend to gravitate towards big concepts and things, but I do. On the flip side, here's the thing: I value attention to detail, right? So now, if I'm self-aware, I can pair myself with someone who has that attention to detail, and now we make a great team, right? You're a musician. That's another. This is a different conversation. That we could have. We could do a whole podcast on this thing. But many times when I'm in a setting where we are trying to set up a business or help a business operate better, I come back to the band analogy. It's like putting together a band. It's always about that, right? It's the 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 guitar player or the lead singer cannot do their job effectively if they don't have a solid rhythm section, right? And vice versa. If the lead is way too out there, the rhythm section just gets distracted and doesn't know what to do, right? And I really like that analogy because in sports, there's yeah, there's people who are very good at certain things, right? Especially in football, right? American football, right? But many sports are, it's a team playing together, like really like a team, where you don't see a lot of individualism and things. But in a band, it's completely different because every single one of the members of the band, unless they are playing like let's say a horn section or something like that, right? Every single one of them has a very specific function, right? And it's like you can't. uh, I mean, there's people who are virtuosos, but you can't substitute, right? You can't bring in someone who's playing the keys and make them do the drum piece and whatever. It's just not. It just doesn't work, right? So in a business, it's like that. Every single person has their, or not a person, a role has their specific responsibilities that they have to fulfill, and that kind of like brings everything together. Um, I kind of like veered off your original question, so I apologize for
No,
that,
no, no,
Rafael.
no. You
Yeah.
actually you actually brought it together because using music
Mm-hmm.
is for me is it makes it a lot easier to see
Mm-hmm.
the issue at hand, right?
Right.
I there's an old saying that comes from, and I always forget the name. I need to write this down, look it up. But it was a, a gentleman who was a software developer, but way back when we were
Mm-hmm.
still developing things with big mainframes and punch cards and things like that. And he said something that was very specific for software development, but I think many people would agree that it applies to organizational structure as well. He
Mm-hmm.
said that, and I'm completely paraphrasing here, but he said something to the effect of the the product of an organization, in this case, the software that is written by a group of developers,
Right.
reflects the inadequacies of that organization,
Mm.
right? So whatever inadequacies are present in a particular organization can easily be seen by just
Mm.
observing the product. Do you agree with that? Do you see that in your experience? And if so, then how do you reconcile that? Because evidently, if it got to that point, there's little self-awareness on this side, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. If you think about automobiles, and how they have changed over the years, right? If you would bring up a car in the 70s, it has all the imprints of the inadequacies of that industry, right? At that moment. So everything from cars that exploded, if you hit them from behind and whatever, right? So yeah, definitely. That's now the one thing that comes to mind though is the this thinking, actually, systems thinking, and quality. What is the output that you're generating? Where are you inadequate, right? Because if you pass it on, you create a problem for the next person, right? So it's and if they are inadequate as well, and they are um, if they accept that you pass it on, then the issue compounds, and you see that at the end of the product, right? So in a manufacturing environment, that's easily seen, but it happens everywhere, right? Yeah.
So let me throw something again. I keep throwing things at you and see how they resonate with you. Because you mentioned two things, and I'm going to bring them together and see if this makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. You mentioned focus earlier on.
Hmm. Hmm.
As a
Yep.
company, there has to be a certain amount of focus because you're targeting a market, you're targeting a specific
Yep.
customer base, and and these things are very important and they matter, at all levels of the organization,
Correct.
independent of whether you're an organization of 5 or 500,000, right?
Yeah.
And then you brought the example of music, which again I love because as we
Yeah.
both are musicians.
Hmm.
But in music, in the example of a band, you can't just focus on what you're doing,
Oh no.
right? And that's one of the reasons why, even though I love AI and AI is it's going to be great and it is great right now. I mean, it helps me do a lot of different things. You can't get AI systems to sound
Can
like
jam.
humans, right? Like
Hmm.
to jam. The byproduct,
Hmm.
it doesn't have that feel because as a musician, you have to do two things. You have to focus on two things. You have to focus on what you're doing and your role as a
Hmm.
bassist, as a guitar player, as a singer, whatever the case may be. But you also have to focus on how everyone else is coming together to make the song sound a particular way.
Yeah.
And that seems like an oxymoron there because how do you focus on more than one thing at a time,
Very easy.
right? Please carry on.
Purpose, my friend. Purpose.
Tell me
Purpose.
more.
It's so the one driver. This is how I paint it. In a business, you have roles, responsibilities, and processes, right? And processes are what help drive. So the reason for building together a business and how you succeed with a business is that you succeed repeatedly, right? You do this over and over again. If you have to do everything from scratch the first time, you don't have a business, right? You're just doing things basically, right? So so you have to be able to do things repeatedly the same way and succeed. And that's when you bring in a process. And the process is, right, a recipe basically, right? It's like if this happens, then I do that, right? And you can apply that at different levels in the company, okay? You can do that at, hey, I have a process for producing something, mustard, whatever, right? I grind the seeds and I do it this way and put some water in it, etc. I end up with mustard, right? But then you have the process on how you deliver that to the customer. So, order comes in, I see, a credit card was okay, it's fine, I ship it, right? You do whatever you have to do, right? So you have processes at all levels. But the problem is this: with large businesses or businesses that are operating in a fast environment, you eventually going to find situations where the process breaks. You're going to find something, the process is then if this happens, then do that. That's in its simplest form. You're going to find a scenario where the if this is something that is really new. You never seen it before. So what do you do in those cases? And what happens in the garage scenario is you shout, right? You call the guy, or and in a larger organization, the phone rings, right? So you call the boss, you ask a question, what do we do in this case, whatever. But the real question that we have to ask is what happens when the boss is not in the room? You know, someone will have to make a decision. Someone will have to make a decision, and that decision is going to be driven by three things: the the values that are prevalent in the organization, the shared purpose of that organization, and the culture. If those are solid and are good and are aligned with the owner's values and in general the values of the organization, the decision that any person in that role makes is going to be a good decision.
That's hard. I mean, I agree with you, but it's a lot easier in a band.
Yeah.
you know, it's
The
a lot
purpose
easier
is
in a
the
band,
song, right? You kind of
right?
know you have rehearsed, or you have a specific, you have values, which is the specific style and things that you like, and as a collective band, right? You know, there's things that you may like on your own that the rest of the band don't like, and you know that you shouldn't go there, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you know people are going to get mad at you. So you have this idea of what's the product, you know, what's the final purpose, and you know what to do at a given moment, right? Yeah.
But it's actually more than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at least my experience playing music is there's more often than not shared appreciation for what the others are doing and
So that's
within the
the values.
band, right? I'm a guitarist,
Mm.
right? And you're a drummer,
Mm.
right? And I
Yeah.
don't play drums, but
Huh?
if you're telling me something, I'm gonna listen because you're the drummer,
Mm.
and we're listening to the bassist, right? And we all respect and appreciate the gifts
I
and what each other has to do. But it has been my experience, and I think you remember when we were working together, is in organizations, especially large ones, people very quickly lose respect and appreciations for certain roles within the organization.
It's because
Like
they
for
don't know
example,
what the other person is doing, right? They don't
exactly.
understand the complexities, right? But you said the right word. It's a gift, right? It's a, hey, I made this for you. You know, so if someone comes to you and says those words, Rafael, I made this for you, so especially for you. Here you go. What would you say?
Thank you.
You would say thank you, and you would cherish that, right? And you say I should put this in a place where it's kind of like, you know, or do something with it that it's, you know, if they give you food, for example, you would try to, you won't throw it away, right? So it's a it that's but the usually the thing is that people don't understand the effort that the other person is putting into it, right? And it's like it's just like, you know, and they dismiss it. There's contempt, and they don't know what they are doing, right? Well, if they don't know what they are doing, why don't you help them, right? That's all. So yeah, and it's a problem of leadership in general. You know,
Yeah.
what does the leader bring together, right? I see it says lead, you know, or is
That's
that
right.
lead?
No, no, no. It's not lead. It's actually lead.
Promo.
Yeah. Well, my friend, like I told you, in a blink of an eye, the
Hmm.
time just flew. I'd like to
Hmm.
give you an opportunity. This podcast is called Three Thoughts On, right?
Mm. Mm.
So, what do you want to? What three things would you like to leave the audience with on the conversation that we just had?
I think that I'm gonna go back to the same thing, you know, and I'm gonna kind of like urge people to do this, you know, work on things that are interesting for you know, that light you up. Um, Work with people that you appreciate, help them, right? And you know, give as much as you can. Don't ask for a return, and you'll get what you need. Right? It's yeah.
Awesome. Where can people learn more about you? Do you have a website or
Well,
LinkedIn?
my website is Thrivemonger, like fearmonger, but instead of fear, it's thrive. You know, I realize that I've been telling people that they can thrive, thrive, thrive. So I said, well, I'm kind of like a thrivemonger. But if you look up Huba Rostonics, Huba on LinkedIn, you'll find me fairly easily. So yeah, thanks for asking. I also
Okay.
write on Substack, so it's called the Pill with a double P, and that means it's purpose, process, innovation, leverage, and leadership. So the five things that you need in every project.
I am a
Yep,
subscriber of the pill,
you
so
are.
yes. Huba, it's always a pleasure. We need to do this again.
Yep.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for being my guest, and let's talk soon.
Alrighty. Thank you, Rafa.